Good morning. I, too, want to congratulate ARPA for its 20 years of dedication for analysis and policy research for Armenia. We all know that Armenia needs it, and this organization has been dedicated to studying, analyzing, and attempting to be of assistance. The degree to which it has been of actual assistance is hard to say. It's hard to say who, if anybody, is listening. But nonetheless, the work is there to be drawn upon when people are ready to do it. I want to be personal. Going back to my youth in the San Joaquin Valley of California, my father put me into the Armenian Youth Federation, the AYF. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know why I was there, except that everyone in my small community was a member, and we had dances and athletics. But also there was talk about a free Armenia. And although I was a very Americanized person in a very small community, I too sort of fantasized because, like many people, and many of you, I always looked at the index to find the word Armenia and Armenian, and very rarely found the word, and it was troubling that it wasn't there. And so now, I was in an organization that talked about a free and independent Armenia. It was a fantasy, but it caught my attention and my own fantasies, as I even dreamed that someday Armenia could be an independent country, and that its flag would be raised in front of the United Nations, and that even, as the fantasy went farther, that Richard Hovannisian could be the ambassador of Armenia to the United Nations. That didn't happen, although I did live long enough, thank God, to see the flag of Armenia raised. Not by me, but by a person who bears my name. And so, unexpected things happen. It also motivated me to study the Republic of Armenia. I knew that that republic, which existed for 3 years, was very controversial, lost in mythology, lost in controversy. And so I spent my professional career exploring that republic, its leaders, its organization, its friends and its foes, and also the issues that it faced and that are still being faced. Issues such as governance. What kind of government should Armenia have? There was in 1918, 1919, 1920, a great deal of lip service to democratic institutions. And in honor of the leaders of the Republic, they did try to implement some of them, talking in terms of equality before the law of all the sexes and races and religions and ethnic groups being equal citizens of the Republic of Armenia, and holding what seemed to be parliamentary elections, a cabinet-style of government, parliamentary system of government, following the British kind of government that seemed very progressive, and even allowing women to vote, and even electing women to the Parliament of the First Republic, even at a time when many countries had not extended even the suffrage, the right to vote, to women, and those are countries in the West. But there was also the other view of we're in a time of crisis, and in a time of crisis, one cannot play with democratic institutions. One needs a dictatorship. One needs force. And that was the other view, and this never was resolved, this conflict between those who pushed for democracy and equality and temperance and tolerance, and the others who said, no, this is a revolutionary time and we must engage in forceful revolutionary activity to save our country. Those issues were never resolved. There wasn't enough time to resolve them, but the issues remain. And fast forward to 1988 to 1991. Those of you who lived those years remember the years of Armenian euphoria, of believing that this is the time of resurrection of the Armenian people has arrived. The names of Karabakh were on the lips of everyone, and ultimately even the concept of the unthinkable, and that is Armenia separating from the Soviet Union. In Armenia, too, that movement took force, and you all remember that there was something known as the Hovannisian, in which the leaders of Armenia, the Armenian leaders at that time, headed by Hovannisian, declared their intent to separate eventually from the Soviet Union and to achieve independence. But like the Russian Revolution in 1917, in which the Bolsheviks wanted to collapse time and not wait for the natural and normal evolution of the second stage of the revolution, so too in Armenia, many Armenians wanted to go directly from the Hovannisian to its implementation, that is, to the Declaration of Armenian Independence. They pointed to the fact that Armenia had a very strong diaspora, that it had natural resources such as gemwood, which it could export. It had the means of living as an independent country. And so they were, my colleagues and my friends were surprised when Richard Hovannisian was bold enough to speak out at the time against independence, to warn that independence under these circumstances without sufficient time to disentangle, to disengage from the Soviet Union, could lead to disaster, could lead to economic collapse, could lead to the continuation and the restoration or the repetition of political, economic, and military isolation. Again, I was criticized for that position, and perhaps rightfully so, and in the end, probably Armenia had no choice because the Soviet Union did collapse. And in September of 1991, there was again euphoria in the Armenian world as lambs and sheep were slaughtered and people were given khorovads on the streets of Yerevan, and Armenians around the world celebrated the restoration of Armenian independence. One does not have to be a prophet, nor am I proud and happy of the fact that what I had predicted, and I didn't have to be a prophet to predict it, actually happened very quickly. Darkness, cold, lack of fuel, lack of energy, long lines before dawn to get a piece of bread, encirclement and strangulation, even though initially Armenia seemed to have the advantage as the Western world was more sympathetic to Armenia than any of its neighbors. It had been through the great earthquake, there was a large Armenian diaspora, but as we've seen over the years, even that advantage has dissipated and has been lost as world powers find their national interests and their regional interests and their military interests more in the other states of the Caucasus than in Armenia. And the reliance on the Armenian diaspora was only partly justified. Only partly justified, because the diaspora was not able to stem this movement away from Armenia. The Armenian lobbies, as you know, have worked assiduously to support Armenia, to get financial aid for Armenia, but one by one, such as the embargo on arms for Azerbaijan and other kinds of advantages at the beginning, have gradually slipped away. On the other side, the Armenian diaspora was disappointed in its homeland and its Armenian authorities in its homeland, because it dreamed and believed, as I had as a child, that they would be allowed to go home and to participate in the building of the state, to be a partner in developing their homeland, and not to be looked upon still as akhbars, not to be looked upon still as not trustworthy, and also as a potential threat. We have not overcome this to the present time, and it is an issue and a problem that needs to be addressed. Finally, I would say that we have just been through another election cycle. There is a need to assess, as I'm sure some will, why and how an electorate, a population that loathes the authorities, that criticizes and complains continuously about their status in life, their way of life, the corruption that surrounds them, why that same electorate will go to the polls and elect and re-elect the very people whom it is criticizing every day. There may be explanations. I think I could have an explanation, but it's something that is sort of surprising, because in the United States, if there are those who are really angry at the president and his party and his policies, presumably are going to vote against him. And yet we've seen in Armenia that that did not happen. The papers today will consider some of these aspects, obviously not all of them. And hopefully this conference may be part of a process that eventually and ultimately will help Armenia to escape from a cycle of self-defeat. I want to thank the participants for giving their expertise here. I want to thank the audience for being here, because it shows your own concern and interest in this subject. We look forward to the day.